Hello fellow beekeepers, prospective beekeepers. My name's Wyatt Bates. My wife and I live on a small farm in southern Ohio, and we have kept bees for several years. In addition to keeping bees, we have also planted several pollinator plots, both on an annual basis and perennials. And we've planted a variety of fruit trees and berries. Those are both for our benefit and for the benefit of our pollinator friends. We're fortunate to have really good neighbors who understand our desire to keep bees on our property. Near our farm, there are larger tracts of production farmland. There are several open fields that have been allowed to just grow up with a variety of wild plants and wildflowers. And we have a variety of wooded land around us. Directly behind our farm, there's about 160 acre plot that is divided into fourths, and it's rotated between soybeans, corn, hay, and then 1 year's allowed to rest. So that gives our bees plenty of opportunity to experience whatever it is that southern Ohio has to offer. And they visit these areas as if they were their own. They treat it just like it's their property. And it is. They live here. So let's talk about being a good beekeeping neighbor. Is it important to be a good neighbor? And if so, why? Why would we want to be a good neighbor? After all, it's our land, it's our bees. So why do we need to care? Well, there's a lot of reasons we need to care. And of course it's a good idea. Just like you teach your children to get along with all, as beekeepers, we need to get along with all. Think about this. How did your family and friends first react when they discovered you decided to be a beekeeper? Now, chances are, some of them questioned your insanity, or your sanity, not your insanity, but your sanity. And they began telling you all sorts of horror stories about beekeeping that they'd heard from a friend of a relative who knew someone. We have all heard those stories about how people have been attacked by bees and how people have died by bees, and et cetera, et cetera. So now this is the way your family and friends have reacted. So imagine strangers, how they would react. These folks have known you for a long time. So imagine your neighbor. You come home one day and he looks over in your yard, and there are these little white boxes just waiting to be filled up with all those stinging little insects, just waiting to get over there and drink his pool water and to sting him and his children. So let's talk about what it means to be a good beekeeping neighbor. Well, first off, let's take a look at some of the legal considerations for beekeeping. So you want to make sure you're in compliance with whatever rules, laws, regulations that are out there. In most rural areas, this will not be an issue or a problem. However, if you live in certain towns or certain jurisdictions, housing developments, this can be a hurdle that you're going to have to face and you're going to have to overcome. The Ohio Revised Code, Section 909, Ohio's Apiary law, it's a good idea to become familiar with this particular piece of legislation. This piece of legislation outlines the rules and regulations that the state of Ohio has set forth regulating apiaries. And an apiary is defined as any place where one or more colonies or nuclei of bees are kept. So for your single hive in the backyard, that's an apiary. So for someone down the road that has 20 hives, if they're all together, that's an apiary. The registration for apiary, not per colony, for apiary with the state of Ohio is $5. It's a fantastic bargain. That lets the state of Ohio know that there are active beekeepers. It lets the state know where those beekeepers are, and if there is a problem or an outbreak of disease, it is a way for them to notify you, if you will. But we do need to look a little bit farther. Smaller governmental jurisdictions can impose stricter regulations and rules for zoning of livestock. Now, bees have not necessarily been considered livestock, but there is a provision in most of those associations, most of those towns, there are legal regulations for bees specifically. And one that I'm going to use is an example out of Cleveland. One colony per 2,400 square feet of lot space there are setback requirements from lot lines and buildings, and if you don't know what a setback requirement is, it would require you to be at least 5 to 10 feet away from your neighbor's property line, period, and then so many feet away from the building. So if your neighbor was 5 feet away from your fence line and you wanted to put your bees 5 feet away from your fence line on your side, and you satisfied the 10-foot requirement, assuming that it would be a 10-foot requirement, then you would be okay. But you do want to know what those particular setback requirements are if you live in that kind of an environment. Another thing that you would want to do is you want to have a flyway barrier in front of your hive. What this does is this requires the bees, once they exit the colony, they are required then to fly upwards. This gives them elevation to fly over the top of your neighbors. So your bees aren't coming straight out of the colony, flying straight in and then starting to gradually fly up. This way they come just like this. The other thing you want to have is a fresh water supply. Now, bees are going to go get their water where they want to get their water. But however, best management practices tell us to keep fresh water out for our bees. Several things. Number one is it's healthier for them to drink clean water than it is dirty water. You don't want them in your neighbor's ponds, your neighbor's pools, drinking out of your neighbor's bird bath. So you want to do as much as you can to get or to provide a good, clean water for your bees. Homeowners associations can be even more strict. You may live in a place that's okay with the state of Ohio. There are no local jurisdiction requirements or regulations. However, certain suburbs and certain housing developments may have a homeowners association that says, you know, you can't have stinging insects, you can't have bees, you can't have chickens, you know, various things. So you want to check with you want to know your state rules and regulations. We've already discussed that. That's Revised Code 909 in Ohio. You want to check with your local governmental jurisdictions, whether that would be a county, township, or your community that you live in. And then lastly, you'd want to check if you have a homeowners association, what that homeowners association will allow. Now I mentioned best management practices a little while ago. Ohio State Beekeepers Association has published a very nice brochure on best management practices. If you follow the practices that are in that brochure, then you will be in compliant with everything that the state of Ohio would want you to be compliant with. Now, like any other set of guidelines, there are some folks that might want to modify those guidelines a little bit. But essentially, if you follow the OSBA published guide for best management practices, it can be found on the Ohio State Beekeepers Association's website. It's free. You can download it, study it, know it, and then you'll know that you're doing the best practices that you can. So before you start keeping bees in your particular area, know your regulations and know your rules for your area before. That's the first step in being a good neighbor, is being compliant with whatever rules and regulations there are. Now, you may want to check with your insurance company. Some insurance companies may say, we don't care if you keep bees on your property or not. Some insurance companies may have restrictions against that. And then some may actually have riders that you can purchase to cover you in the event that there is an issue that arises with beekeeping. Keep in mind, lawsuits do happen. It's rare that a beekeeping lawsuit goes all the way through the process. However, there are some attorneys that can tell you that there are some times that has happened, and you want to just be prepared for it for yourself. You know, one of the issues is how do you know the bee came from your particular hive? Now, if you're the only beekeeper in the area, you only have one hive, it might be something to be concerned about. The other thing, in 1914, Robert Frost, great American poet, wrote a poem called Mending Wall, and he says that good fences make good neighbors. That was true in 1914. It is certainly true today. Fences serve several functions. One of the functions is they prevent curious people and pets from getting too close to your apiary. Some folks don't understand bee behavior, and they might walk right up and attempt to pick up one of the cute little bees. They might walk over, get too close to the hive and disturb the hive. They may even be brave enough to open the lid and just, what's in there? I want to see what's in there. So a fence will help you prevent that from happening. Fences also can act as a flyway barrier. Before the bee can go over the fence, it has to clear the height of the fence, and a good 6-foot fence will put the height, the elevation of the bee in flight pretty much over the head of most anyone who is around or close to you. The other things that a fence can do is, depending on the area that you live and the kind of wildlife that you have in your area, it can prevent that wildlife from being a nuisance. You know, if there are bears in your area, you might want to have an electric fence. If there are just some nosy dogs, you know, just any kind of a fence, any kind of a barrier or chicken wire fence would keep the dogs out. But fences are a really good idea, and there again, that's another step in becoming a good neighbor. Let them also know that you are prepared to take very good care of your bees. Pull out the best management practices brochure that we talked about a little bit earlier. Show them that these are the kinds of management practices that you are following, and that this is what the Ohio State Beekeepers Association and the Ohio State regulators, our legislators, have said, if you follow these guidelines, we think you're doing a pretty good job. We think you're doing as good a job as you possibly can. So let them know that you are planning on following a best management practice routine of some sort. Take the time to explain to them the difference between honeybees and their social structure and other bees that are out there in the neighborhood. Bumblebees, wasps, yellow jackets, hornets, sweat bees. There's a lot of people that do not understand the difference in all of those stinging insects. And as a good neighbor, it's your job to help them understand that. Let them know that a yellow jacket and a honeybee are vastly different in their behavior and in their temperament. Let them know that honeybees typically do not want to sting you. That's a lifetime commitment. Anytime we know from our biology that when honeybees sting, it kills them. They die off. So a honeybee, that's a last resort. They'll do it to protect themselves and to protect the hive, but they just won't indiscriminately go out and pick people to sting, as it seems like some of the other stinging insects in the neighborhood may do. And if they're still a little belligerent or a little apprehensive, work with them a little bit. Be willing to show them your operation. Say, you know, why don't you come over and take a look? Now, I would recommend you do that with an empty hive. Set an empty hive out, you know, in your driveway or in your yard, and have them to come over and show them what all of the different parts of the hive are. That goes a long way in building good relationships, because then as they're standing there in their yard looking over at your yard, and someone says, well, what are they doing over there? And they can say, oh, well, you see, so that's the landing board, and in that bottom is where the bees live, and that upper chamber up there, well, that's where they like to go to make their honey. And I learned that because my neighbor told me that. So now they become the expert amongst their circle of friends. But it really does help to show them what is the various components, the various parts of the hive. And then do some research, find a good video, and show them how you handle a nuke, how that you install a nuke, how it's already a colony in progress. You already have a queen, you got drones, you got workers, you got eggs, you got larvae. I mean, you got it all in there, and you're off to a head start. So show them a video of that. It doesn't have to be anything very long, just something that's informative. Also show them how a package of bees are installed, and explain to them the difference between a package and a nuke. they will find that really fascinating. The more your neighbor understands and knows about what it is that you're doing, and the more they know and understand the behavior of bees and the social structure of bees, the more they're going to accept the fact that there are bees in their neighborhood. When you talk about the social structure, you can contrast it with the bee movies that they have seen, the cartoons, the various publications that have humanized bees. You can let them know that, yeah, there are some differences here, and here's what those major differences are. Explain, the queen's job and how she sets the temperament for the entire hive, and that if you have a hive that starts getting too rowdy, one of the things you can do is you can change the queen. So you can help them know that you are watching that, you're following your best management practices, and you're doing everything you can possibly do to keep your bees healthy and to keep you and your neighborhood safe, and yet be able to provide all of the pollination that your neighborhood needs. I would recommend that you discuss the Epipen. Some people are highly allergic to bees. Some people are not, but you'd be very wise to have an Epipen with you and know how to use it, and show your neighbor what it is and explain its use to them. You don't want to scare them, but you just want to let them know that if there is a more severe accident, that you're prepared to step in and help in that case also. Then show them the gear that you use. Show them the veil and how it fits over the helmet, or how it's all one integrated piece, and how it protects your face and your neck. Show them what a good fitting bee suit or a good fitting jacket, how it looks and how it protects you and the bees. It keeps the bees away from you, so it keeps you from getting stung. By preventing you from getting stung, it prevents the bee from dying and releasing the pheromones that signal that there is a problem, and gets the rest of the bees a little upset. So explain those pieces of equipment. Many beekeepers use gloves. Some don't. Certainly that's a personal choice. But when you're demonstrating to your neighbors, show them that there are gloves, the various kinds of gloves, and how they work, how effective they can be. Then show them your smoker. Describe what the smoker is used for. If we go back to our friend the bee movie, it's not to panic the bees, actually. Of course, they will think that there could be a fire, but we know that helps calm the bees. It helps them to settle down into the hive, consume sugar, consume honey in case they do have to leave the hive, but it does help calm the bees. And then show them your hive tool, the special curves and surface areas, how those things help you open and close the hive much more efficiently than using screwdrivers and hammers would. Also let them know why it's important to use all the gear all the time. We see videos all the time on YouTube of people working bees without any protective equipment at all. I admire them that they have the skill, the ability to be able to do that, but I use equipment all the time. I'm also a motorcyclist. I believe in wearing my helmet, my gloves, and my jacket, not because I intend to fall off the motorcycle, but in case I fall off the motorcycle. So I don't wear my veil, my suit, and my gloves expecting to get stung. I wear those to keep me from getting stung, just in case. So you want to make sure that your neighbors understand that. And then if your neighbor has further interest and you feel comfortable and you're so inclined, get a good fitting second bee suit. Suit your neighbor up with all of the gear. I would recommend definitely with gloves, whether you work with gloves or not. I would recommend putting gloves on the neighbor. And taking the neighbor out to your apiary and do a hive inspection with your neighbor. Show them how that if you use smoke, how you gently apply a little bit of smoke in the front and under the cover. You wait a minute or so. You open the cover up. You show him the activity, or her the activity that's going on in. And then as you take the colony apart, you can show them some of the different functions that the bees are doing in there. You'll be able to see nurse bees, attending the larvae and the baby bees that are in there. You'll be able to show them larvae. You can show them capped brood. If you're very fortunate, you'll be able to show them the queen and her activity and the attendants that are around her. You can show them the difference in the drones and in the worker bees, so they'll get a good feel for what's going on inside that hive. That goes a long way in making good neighbors and in making sure that your neighbor's informed, so that when they drive down the road and see a hive, or when they come home, that's no longer a mystery box over there for them. They'll understand what's going on. Communication, communication, communication. Don't be afraid to ask them for questions. Everybody's curious. Everybody wants to know, and some of the questions that we get can stump us a little bit. So this is a good opportunity for you too to educate yourself, re-educate yourself, refamiliarize yourself with the information that you studied when you started beekeeping, however long or however recent that has been. It's a really good chance to review. We know one of the questions we always get is, aren't you afraid of getting stung? And it's like, yeah, I don't want to get stung. Well, does it hurt? Well, of course it hurts. Then they'll ask you about the Africanized bees, and that gives you then an opportunity to talk about that and how that we do not have that in Ohio, and if we do have aggressive hives in Ohio, that we work very diligently to suppress those, because we do not want to ruin our population. They will ask you, well, when we see you out working, why do you always have a suit and veil on? Can't you just go out and open that door up and just take a quick peek in there? And of course the short answer is yes, and the long answer is no, because, and then you explain why you do these things. They're very curious about the structure of the bees. You know, we've talked, or the hive, the colony. We've talked about that before, but it doesn't hurt to review that, because not all of your neighbors are going to be really interested, and you're going to get these questions periodically. They'll also want to know, what do bees eat in the wintertime? And this gives you an opportunity then to explain to your neighbors how that there are various techniques, possibly medications that you may use to treat various conditions, how you may use sugar water or fondant and different kinds of things to make sure that your bees have plenty of food during the winter. It gives you an opportunity to let them know that you consider your bees to be like livestock, that you take care of them. There's a major investment here. What do you do with your bees in the winter? They'll want to know that. So you get a chance to explain to them the processes that you go through to close the hive down and to get it secured for winter, to make sure that the bees are secured, to make sure that there's plenty of food and that they're going to be able to stay warm enough and environmentally take care of them. Big question that people get now, especially the last few years, is why do we paint these boxes all these different colors? Doesn't that confuse the bees? And does it make a difference if you paint them a certain color? They used to be white. Why aren't they all white anymore? So it gives you an opportunity then to talk to them about why do we do that? It makes our yard prettier. It makes the bee yard prettier. It draws attention to them. And no, the bees really don't care if they're in a white or a cream colored box. As far as I know, it doesn't seem to make much of a difference. Also explain to your neighbors why fresh local honey has advantages over store-bought honey. Explain to them about the local pollen, the local nectar, how it helps possibly build some of their immunities, and it also helps your local environment. It helps your beekeeper, obviously. And then don't be afraid to share the wealth. You've gone to a lot of work to set your apiary up. You've gone to a lot of work to make sure that your bees are healthy and they're happy and they're productive. You've spent time with your neighbors to tell them all of this wonderful stuff. So now show them. Here's where you get to do your show and tell, if you will. Get some honey sticks. Have some honey sticks on hand. It's surprising the number of people that really don't know what honey is. They don't really know what it tastes like, and they don't understand the benefits. So take some time, be that good neighbor. Give them a taste of the honey so they know what it tastes like. Have some recipes that you can share with them. Some good recipes that use good fresh honey. One of our favorites is a beer bread with honey in it, and you can really, it really pops that. You can really get that good honey flavor. And don't be afraid to have some foodstuffs on hand. Some bread that you've made, some recipes for honey glazed chicken possibly. We use honey on pork chops, how you can use it pretty much on anything. Show them what cut comb honey looks like, how you actually take that comb out of the hive, out of that frame, and you cut it and all the benefit that's in that. A lot of folks have never seen that. That'll be really, really fascinating. And then maybe if you get enough neighbors that are interested, and you live in a community that this would work, challenge your community to have a honey cook-off, if you will. You might even provide a small amount of the honey, or make the honey available at an affordable price. And when you have a neighborhood picnic or barbecue, have a special section for who made the most interesting honey-based dessert, bread, or even entree. There's a lot of uses. So I guess we go back to the golden rule. When it comes to your bees and your neighbors and your neighborhood, treat those neighbors the way you would want to be treated. If your neighbor was bringing something onto their property that gave you a lot of concern, you would appreciate it if they would come over and just have a nice conversation with you and talk with you and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. Do you have any questions? Let me help you understand this. And you go like, yeah, I've never known anybody that's had pythons before, but you know, they sort of creep me out. But can you tell me about your pythons? Can you tell me about your snakes? Well, they're going to be just as curious for you to tell them about your bees. Whatever it is that you're doing, remember, communicate, communicate, communicate. We tell our children that, we hear that all the time at work, and it works really well in our personal life. I hope you found something in this that you can use. I'd be happy to field any questions that you can think of that you send to me. If I can answer them immediately, I will. If not, I will work to get those answers and reach out to colleagues that can help. And as you can see, it's starting. The sun is starting to go down. It's starting to get evening time here at Chaos Hollow Farm. The bees have gone to bed. The butterflies are starting to slow down a little bit. I don't hear much activity around me. Pretty soon we're going to be hearing the night bugs and the crickets, and I hope you all have a great day.